I'll take the over on Ken Walker's career with the Seattle Seahawks, though, and he headlines the love list, the favorable matchup against the vaunted defense of the Las Vegas Raiders.
Ken Walker makes my love list, as you just mentioned. Top 5 running back. Look, he's awesome. He's an awesome talent. He's coming off the bye. He's playing the Raiders. Do we need to talk more? I mean, like, you want good stats? You look at me like you want good Kenneth Walker stats. Here's what I'll say. In 5 games at the start, he's averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. He's averaging 22 touches per game in that stretch. 24% target share in Week 10. I know, like, the last time we saw him, it wasn't a great game. That was Tampa Bay. I'm not really super worried about it here, especially when you think about Las Vegas, who gives up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Ken Walker is my running back 5 this week. I have him as a top 5 running back.
Yep. I think the thing that separates Walker from these other rookie running backs is just his touchdown equity. He's already had 7 touchdowns. They run when it's in close. It is a more pass-happy offense than it ever was, really, under Russell Wilson, because apparently Geno Smith is better than Russell Wilson. But certainly Ken Walker has
Mike White better than Zach Wilson. Maybe it's something about quarterbacks with the last name Wilson.
Yeah, exactly. Who have been invested in heavily.
Yeah,
but so
good.
Speaking of Wilsons, it's a great unintentional segue, Matthew. I don't think you saw that one coming, but Jeff Wilson Jr., he is on the love list, as any running back should be going up against the Houston Texans.
It is all about Wilson today, and finally a positive Wilson here, as Jeff Wilson Jr. has outsnapped Raheem Mostert since he came to the Miami Dolphins, 68-43 over the last 2 games. He's averaging over 19 fantasy points per game. He's got 31 touches in those 2 games. He's got the 2 touchdowns. He's got 215 scrimmage yards, as you see it there on your screen. And you love this matchup with Houston. We've talked about the historically bad. That's the key adjective.
Yes.
Historically bad Texans run defense. They give the most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. They've allowed 140 rushing yards and at least 1 rushing touchdown in 5 straight games. And so I think both Wilson and Mostert are viable against the Texans, absolutely. But Jeff Wilson Jr. comes in at running back 13 for me this week. And I think he gets 65% of the Dolphins' running back touches in this game, and that's going to be enough to have a top 15 day.
Yep, I think it's going to be interesting just to see how much Mike McDaniel wants to pass versus run the ball in this matchup, because if they want to run the ball, they'll be able to do it. If they want to pass the ball, they'll be able to do that too. They've been a very heavy pass team to this point, but maybe now with Wilson and Mostert, that flips around, and certainly they should be playing with the lead.
And by the way, we're talking about Zach Wilson and the switch to Mike White. There has been, as of this broadcast, nothing has been announced, but there have been some rumblings out of Texas, that the Houston team may go from Davis Mills to Kyle Allen. Hometown boy made good. Kyle Allen, former Texas A&M Aggies, also played high school ball in Texas. So, and he's had cup of coffees as a starter with Carolina and Washington as well. So Kyle Allen potentially could be starting for the Texans this week. Either way, it's a lost season for Houston, so I think Miami's going to be able to do whatever they want. And so even though they may want to go past happy, I don't know that the Texans are going to be able to keep up with Miami. And so second half of the game, they just may be running anyway.
I feel like someone's getting to 150 yards in that game, whether it's Jeff Wilson, Tyreek Hill, or one of their other stars.
Mike Gesicki, anyone. Anyone could get to 150 yards against the
a lot
Texans
of candidates.
Defense.
Let's go to some others receiving votes.
Sure.
Headlined by the now suddenly relevant Latavius Murray with Melvin Gordon out of town.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos have dropped Melvin Gordon, much like a football to Melvin Gordon. Yeah. What Melvin Gordon does to footballs, the Broncos have done to Melvin Gordon.
That's good prep
material. That's the better joke. That's the better joke. The second one I nailed better. Anyway, cut that out. Cut out the first joke. Yeah. Just go with what Melvin Gordon has done to football, the Broncos have done to Melvin Gordon. That's the better joke. Make sure we just keep that one, please. Anyway, Latavius Murray, makes the other choosing votes. Look, 21 touches last week. He's involved in the passing game now with 3 receptions each of the past 2 weeks. This guy is somebody who has scored a lot, right? He's scored in 3 of the last 4 games. And the Panthers, even though they're a better run defense than it may look number-wise because the Bengals game just so skewed it with Joe Mixon getting the 5 touchdowns and the whole thing, the fact of the matter is they don't want Russell Wilson to throw it.
No.
I mean, jokes aside, they are actually running a similar Jets offense where they're trying to hide Russell a little bit. And so is Latavius Murray good? No. But is he going to get massive volume in a decent matchup? Yes. And, on this Thanksgiving week, sometimes that's all you can ask for.
Latavius Murray's okay. He's better than Mike White.
Yeah, he's
relative
Latavius
to
Murray is
position.
fine. He's just 1,000 years old. He's like he's a colleague of mine.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like we're contemporaries,
Yeah.
Latavius Murray and I. But
Very
anyway,
similar kind of visual profiles.
very visual. Latavius Murray and I have gone to bars together, and people can't tell us apart.
Yeah, I can vouch for that personally.
1,000% happens all the time. Maybe tonight on the biggest party night of the year. Just some other quick names. Rashad White. You know, we've talked about him quite a bit with Leonard Fournette. We'll see what happens, but certainly it seemed like much more of a split before the bye between White and Uncle Lenny. And how about Kieran Williams? Surprising news. You know, much like the Broncos just sort of out of the blue releasing Melvin Gordon, the Rams really out of the blue released Darrell Henderson.
What was that?
I mean, we thought you hated Cam Akers. We didn't know you hated Darrell Henderson.
Well, who else
but
do you
apparently
hate?
you hate Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, Stafford getting cut tomorrow?
Yeah, I
Very
mean,
strange.
who knows? You know, just don't cut my little Cooper Kupp. But anyway, so super weird. Henderson didn't have a lot of touches last week, but then they were like, you know, and McVay after the game was like, he's banged up a little bit. And anyway, now he's a free agent, or he's on waivers, I should say. But anyway, so we'll see if anyone claims Melvin Gordon to the Rams, Darrell Henderson to the Broncos. Who says no?
Yeah.
America.
Don't-
America says no.
Yeah.
Anyway, the fact of the matter is that I know this for a fact. The Rams would like Kieran Williams to be the guy. They really like him. We'll see. I don't know that he profiles as kind of an every down back as well, but played 55% of the snaps, had 8 touches. He's the pass catching back. Like, he's a nice pass catching back. I think that's the important thing. You know, he had 30 receiving yards, which was tied for the most by a Rams running back this season. Gives you how bad the Rams have been so far. But in a game when they're on the road to Kansas City, they may have to be throwing quite a bit, especially if Stafford doesn't play. So I do think Kieran Williams is a viable flex and an interesting player. It's just because he's going to be a starting running back in the NFL, and that has value in fantasy football.
Yep.
I don't know that he's going to have massive success, but at least he's a pass catcher.
You've said some ridiculous sentences on this show, but I think "Don't cut my little Cooper Kupp" is certainly on the Mount Rushmore of ridiculous sentences uttered. Let's go to hate list.
Did you think 48 hours ago? Did you think Darrell Henderson was in trouble?
No,
no one
everyone.
did.
Yes, who could be next? It's like a Final Destination movie.
Yeah, exactly. Very Game of Thrones over there.
Yes.
The Rams house is the new Game of Thrones.
Exactly.
It's the new House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon. It's House of the Rams.
Yeah, Dragon's House.
Right, Dragon's House.
All right, let's talk Alvin Kamara, who headlines your hate list. It's been a very underwhelming season for the Saints superstar.
He's averaging, over his last 3 games, he's averaging 13 touches. Like 13 like what are we doing here?
It's not great.
No, it's not great. But I mean, listen, in fairness, when you have Andy Dalton, you don't want to take the ball out of his hands. Like,
yeah,
really?
Gotta give it to Juwan Johnson.
It's a terrible matchup with San Francisco, who allows the second fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs. There's only one running back this entire year that's had over 70 yards from scrimmage in a game against the Niners, and that was Christian McCaffrey, who now, of course, plays for the 49ers. And so you're like, all right, well, he's probably not getting to 70 yards here. And he's not getting a ton of touches, so he's not going to be massively involved in the passing game here. So, well, maybe he'll get into the end zone. He's got one game this year where he scored a touchdown. Like, he had 3 in that game, so he was awesome. But, like, he's had one game this year. You know, when they get in close, they like to use Taysom Hill. They're throwing to Juwan Johnson. It's super weird usage for who I think is the best player on their team, right? But for whatever reason, he's just not getting massive usage here. And so in a bad matchup on the road, where Kamara averages just 10 fantasy points per game this year, when he is on the road, he's outside my top 20. He comes in at running back 23, which is much lower than I would ever have Alvin Kamara. But honestly,
Alvin Kamara.
But there's literally
grace.
Look here on your screen about just what he's done on the road this year. Just nothing. Like, he's had one game with more than double-digit fantasy points, and that was at the Cardinals. The Niners, as we now have very recent evidence, are much better than the Arizona Cardinals
28 points better, apparently.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
All right,
yes.
let's jump to Cordarrelle Patterson, who goes up against the now literally vaunted defense of the Washington Commanders. They're 4.5-point favorites, the Commanders. Home field advantage these days is worth
Underdogs to the
1.5.
Commanders.
I'm saying the Commanders are 4.5-point
Correct,
favorites
yes.
over the Falcons at home. Home field advantage these days is worth 1.5 to 2 points. So the market, BetMGM, is saying the Commanders are a full field goal better than the Falcons on a neutral. And I guess largely for that reason, and the reason the run defense has been excellent, really turned Dameon Pierce into a pumpkin. And you think they'll do the same to Cordarrelle Patterson?
Yeah, I don't know if they'll turn him into a pumpkin. Maybe it's
A Brussels sprout?
Yeah, it's Thanksgiving. Squash,
Mashed
something
potato?
like that.
Yeah.
Mashed potato stuffing. I don't know. The fact of the matter is that since returning from IR, he's averaging about 10 touches a game. Now, sometimes they're high leverage touches. They're in the green zone. They're in the red zone. They're inside the 10-yard line, goal to go situations, which is nice. But he's not being used in the passing game, which is something that he was used a lot last year. He has just a 7% target share since he's come back from injury. In fairness, they don't throw. So, you know what I mean? I don't know that anyone has a massive target share, and maybe it increases a little bit with no Kyle Pitts. But to your point about the Commanders' defense, they've given up one rushing touchdown, just one rushing touchdown to a running back in the past 6 games. They're allowing just 53 rushing yards per game and 3.3 yards per carry to opposing running backs over that stretch. They're a top 5 run defense over the last 4 weeks. And though the fact of the matter is that Patterson is in a bit of a committee here with Tyler Algier and Caleb Huntley. And so on the road as an underdog against a tough run defense in a committee, Cordero Patterson's going to need a touchdown to pay off. He's outside my top 30 this week.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.